I'm Jay.
And I'm Steve. Oh, no, advantage. Chris. I'm Chris.
That's a nat 1.
That's a 7.
Oh, I can't read it from across the table.
Uh-huh.
We're
the Grumpy Dungeon Masters.
Yeah, that. What he said.
Hi, Craig.
So what are we talking about before we even start this thing?
So last time we talked about homebrew items that you have made for your campaigns and that kind of topic. So I thought we would continue that line of thinking and move on to your homebrew campaigns.
All right.
And I guess what they are, what inspired them, how you run them, how often you run them. Just kind of keep that theme going for a little bit.
All right, we can try that. So my own homebrew campaign I have been running on and off for 20 some odd years. Like I pretty much started building my own campaign world about the time I started playing D&D, which was, what year did I start? 1990, I think. So long damn time. It has definitely morphed a lot over the years. Hopefully it's gotten better than it was when I was 15 and making shit up.
Probably not. Probably
yeah, it's probably just as awful as a 15-year-old kid's thoughts on things. So the latest iteration started about 6 years ago. I had just started going back to school to get my degree, so my time to run was somewhat limited on weekends. So I set up an idea that I really ended up liking and use all the time. So I don't have a proper name for my campaign, but the current iteration of it was taking place in a city called Hobtown. Now, Hobtown is run by hobgoblins. They all sort of live underground. The highest level of their city is where all the outsiders stay. So all of the adventurers come here for one specific reason. Hobtown has a permanent portal open in the city. And every time somebody goes through, it can go to different random locations. So this, as a game master who had limited time for campaign building, lets me just run one-off games within a campaign setting. So if I want to just run, say, an ice dungeon or something like that, boom, they hop through the portal. Oh, we appeared out in the middle of the wilderness. Oh, look, there's an ice cave. Let's go see what's in it. Or if I wanted to run them into, some other dungeon that's already planned out, I mean, I could even tie in things like a yawning portal into this. They could end up on Sigil if I wanted them to, the elemental plane of fire. Literally anywhere I, as a DM, want them to go for a single one-shot adventure.
Okay.
Yet it's all in the, it still falls into the campaign aspect. And as I found myself with a little more time, or after I got out of school, then I properly ran a campaign based in that world that extended well beyond just Hobtown. But for a few years, that was kind of all I ran on the weekends.
Okay, so I mean that sounds very interesting. I mean, like there are certain aspects of that in the current D&D lore setup that kind of matches that, and just being able to have that, like, oh, we can go anywhere at any time and explore anything is definitely very useful.
Yep.
So, what about the world? Can you tell us more about the world itself?
Okay, so the setting that I use is there are 13 different countries. Each one is a little bit different. The one that Hobtown is set in, that I ended up running the campaign in, is thousands of years ago, it used to be the Elven capital. Like the elves had control of pretty much the entire continent, but over thousands of years, they've sort of fallen back and just sort of they mostly live in one city at this point. So there's a lot of old lore. I kind of took ideas from Myth Draenor. Are you familiar with it?
Not at all.
Okay, Myth Draenor is a setting. It's in Forgotten Realms, but it used to be an elven city thousands of years ago, and they started playing around with demons and so forth. And at some point, the mythal, which is the elven magic that sort of binds their magic together, kind of collapsed. All the demons came through, and the city was pretty much overrun. So you can definitely look into this stuff. I actually still have the second edition box set for it here. But, it was just sort of based off that. So now there's these old-ass ruins that everybody likes to go exploring in because there's the potential to find incredibly old magic, powerful magic items, even legendary objects. So the entire country that they are in is sort of based on that idea. It is an old world it's begun to get inhabited by humans and other races and so forth, and they come across elven ruins or just really ancient locations all the time. I really, really like the historical aspect, which I've mentioned before. So I like for players to dig into the history of the world, and that was one way I found to do that. The other countries, I'm supposed to run a one-off game this coming weekend in the Dragonlands, which is mostly barbarian tribes, cold, frozen wastelands and mountains with glaciers and so forth. And there's a lot of other countries. There's one that's run by a bunch of merchants, which is sort of a row. If you play in it, you're probably going to be taking place in the city. It's run by a bunch of merchants guilds, aka Docksides from our LARP.
So, who runs Bottertown?
Yeah, it's a bunch of criminals. I mean, what do you expect? So I have I'd have to pull up the entire list if I wanted to, but I have all the other countries written out and sort of just basic aspects of each of them. So if I ever want to run a campaign there or send players there for an adventure, I can.
Very cool.
Yep.
So you mentioned a couple of the races. What are the main playable races in the campaign?
So I generally allow anything from the player's handbook. I do not allow orcs or half-orcs or anything of that nature because they don't exist in my world. And I do not allow dark elves because there is no Underdark. So Underdark creatures don't exist. There are no mind flayers. There are no aboleths. No hook horrors.
Underdark's a very popular setting, so why did you choose to do that?
That's why. quite literally, that's why.
Okay.
I played in enough campaigns that, Underdark this, Underdark this. I want to be an awesome dark elf, but I'm a good guy. I wield 2 scimitars, and, I've seen it enough. I wanted to make sure players didn't have access to that. I don't want them to even think about that. I want to create my own lifeblood, my own world. Hobtown is as close to the Underdark as they're going to get. It is an underground city, kind of almost dwarven build. I tend to use hobgoblins as the primary antagonist.
So when you say hobgoblins, I know there's a couple different variants. What specific variant of hobgoblins do you use?
It's almost identical to the ones that you'll find in Xanathar. No, in Volos. So if you have read the Volos guide, there's a lot of information on hobgoblins. And before Volos came out, I was running this thing. And I had played a 3rd edition Kingdoms of Kalamar campaign years ago, which was I think it was like an off-brand campaign setting. But the primary villains, as it was in there, was hobgoblin. So hobgoblins they're much more organized. They're lawful evil as compared to chaotic evil of orcs. So it's legit, and think evil military. It's very, very organized, very militaristic, and hobgoblins have built an entire society off of that. I just always found that much more fascinating than the Lord of the Rings orcs. Let's just go pillage because we can, because we're evil. It's much better if you actually have villains with a little life behind them, and they're not just pillaging to pillage. They're pillaging for the resources. They're pillaging because they need the territory.
So these are the kind of almost samurai-esque hobgoblins then. Okay.
Yeah, that's a reasonable way to think of them. The ones in Hobtown, while technically that city is lawful evil on average of alignment, it is still a very, very well organized city with laws and rules that are enforced by the Hobgoblin military.
So what are the main? I know you said like hobgoblins are the main antagonists, but what looks like the main common monster fodder that you use in your campaign?
I tend to use a lot of ogres. I say hobgoblins are the antagonists, but truthfully, I don't really use them as antagonists that often. I want players to know that they are evil and that they have a very strong foothold in society. At the same time, I don't really use them very often in battle. The last campaign I ran, they actually ended up helping the players because it was beneficial to them to use their military in that way. And they ended up teaming up to take out tribes of ogres. Ogres, I kind of liked. My ogres, I tend to look towards the Dragonlance campaign for inspiration. And I know you've said you haven't ever played Dragonlance. So ogres are, in Dragonlance, they are pretty much what you see in the monster manual. You know, just big, dumb, clumsy brutes and so forth. But they used to be high society. They were actually, if I recall correct, they were around before the elves were. And they pretty much got cursed by the gods to be stupid and dumb and clumsy. So I kind of take bits and pieces of that for my own ogres. They tend to be run by ogre magi, a la kind of like our LARP and so forth. Where they have smart ogres that sort of run everything, and then the big dumb ogres are just the brutes that do their whim and their bidding.
Okay.
I've always found that for sort of main antagonist, I prefer to have kind of common creatures, as it were. I don't like the absolutely just out there, fascinating creatures that are difficult for players to deal with.
Any examples of those?
Well, like undead. I like for the main villains to be possibly affected by mind-affecting spells, illusions, magics that don't work on. I mean, I guess in 5th edition they might technically work on undead, but that just seems a little weird to me. Like if I recall correctly, undead don't have any resistance to illusions or anything in 5th ed, but that never quite worked for me. I think almost kind of humanoid is what my preference is for the main guys, the main villains.
So who's been your most main villain that you've used?
So the campaign that I wrapped up most recently, it was actually just an elf who was the final conflict. Mind you, the characters played from 1st level up to 20th level. It initially did not start out as a campaign, as I said. It was just sort of me running one-off adventures. But when I finally built it into a campaign, I came up with a whole story and so forth, and they played on up to 20th. So the main villain was an elf who had literally been around for thousands of years, and he had managed to bind himself to the realm of shadows, the plane of shadows, and his long-term goal was to open up and almost pretty much make the prime material into the shadow plane. And he had slowly been bleeding over a few hundred square miles. He had opened up a portal that was bleeding the shadow world into the prime. And he had actually caused the elves to go to war a couple thousand years prior. He is actually the one responsible for the downfall of the Elven Society. He managed to con a couple of the other elves into helping him pretty much start a war with the rest of the elves. By the time it's all said and done, the other 2 elves had been completely corrupted. One of them had made a deal with a creature from the Outer Planes, the Cthulhu-esque, creatures and so forth. What are they? It's not Outer Planes, but Outer Realms, I think it is. And then the other one had gotten cursed by an amulet and made himself into an undead along with his entire army. And then there was the third elf who was the Shadow Master. He's the one who was tied to the realm of shadows. And he just sort of played everybody in the background. And through the course of many, many levels and honestly several years of playing, the players slowly started to piece this thing together. Finally, they went after the different generals. After they got rid of the first two, they went after him. They ended up fighting him on the shadow plane and killing him. But while he was technically just an elf, he was so ingrained into the plane of shadow that he had a lot of powers based off of that. So their biggest strength against him was light spells or light of any nature. They definitely stocked up on scrolls of the sunlight spell. So, that answer your question?
Pretty much. I was just, I've been thinking about, like I said, homebrew campaigns and items and villains and whatnot.
Yeah, because I know you run a lot of Adventurers League, and you're running Forgotten Realms. Is it Waterdeep that you're running?
I just finished going through the Dragon Heist Waterdeep campaign setting, and all my experience in 4th edition was running the main Gotta Stop Orcus campaign setting.
Okay.
So most of the stuff that I did that would be homebrew would be just adventures within those particular areas. Mm-hmm. I have never run or created a huge campaign that's been solely mine.
Now's a good time to start.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't even have to have the entirety of it fleshed out. Starting out, what you want to do is flesh out the location that you're running in, and sort of, if you're going to make any changes in playable races, classes, and so forth, you need all that sort of fleshed out. But over time, you can just build onto this thing. When I started out, the only thing I had fleshed out was Hobtown. Like, I knew kind of what it was. I had a map drawn up of the basics of it. I had the bar that all the players would frequent written up. I knew who ran it and so forth, the NPCs. And then every week or every 2 weeks when I would run, I would put together a new adventure and sort of work off of that and slowly expand the world. Like if you want to have the entirety of your whole world written up before you start running, you may not ever get to run anything that's self-created. Because that takes time. It takes a long time.
Yeah, I definitely think I'm pretty good at what I want to run, and I have a really solid idea. I just haven't put the pen to paper and don't have the people to kind of like bounce it off of yet.
Well, here I am.
Well, no, not bounce it off of, they actually play it with.
Okay.
And like get a lot of feedback on like, did you like this villain? Did you like that? Like do an actual like play test of it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of I've been watching a lot of Star Wars recently, and just thinking of like Vader and a couple other like the iconic characters that existed through theirs, and I have not made like any kind of major decision on that at all. I kind of almost like through the playtest kind of want that to become a thing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So he said I have locations, and I'm still kind of bouncing around ideas as to like what races I would want and what specific like cultural settings that I want to do, because I want to have some unique ideas. I just don't want to steal everything from what I've heard before.
Yeah, and that's how I tried to build my realm as well. I wanted it. It has to be close enough to what people know and recognize, but at the same time, I wanted it to be a little different than Forgotten Realms or Eberron or so forth. Eberron's actually an interesting example. So for my campaign, I personally am not a huge fan of the technology aspect of things, but I still allowed it in my own campaign setting. And primarily it's gnomish, obviously, because that's just sort of D&D, I guess. While Eberron, I don't think had that. A lot of other campaigns sort of build around gnomes, or the ones with technology that intertwine it with magic. And I kind of ran with that with my own campaign. So, like, there was one adventure where the players went through the portal and ended up inside a gnomish cookie factory that had gone haywire. So all of the machines in there were like grabbing gnomes and sticking them into the cookie boxes and, trying to package them up and mail them out.
I mean, it sounds like a good place to start too. If you were going to go to make your own homebrew setting, is just develop an area first that you can have random adventures from, and then just start making the world from there via one shots, and just kind of fill in the blanks as you go.
Yeah, you can definitely do it that way. The portal thing, like, it worked for me. It might not work for everybody. A lot of people prefer to have just a city where all the adventures sort of happen, not necessarily branching and not going through portals and just ending up at random locations. But Waterdeep's a beautiful example. It's a giant city, so there's all sorts of things that live in Waterdeep and under Waterdeep and so forth.
Yeah, like Yawning Portal being one of the most well-known places.
Mm-hmm.
To just start a random adventure from, essentially.
Yeah. It's not hard for players who want to be adventurers or characters that want to be adventurers. It's not hard finding work. Like every barkeep has a place where they're hiring for something. You got all the different guilds that need employees to go and track down so and so for them. We could do an entire podcast on how to do adventures, how to hook adventures.
Oh yeah, and as well as trying to just kind of just get through all the ideas of how to make homebrew items and homebrew worlds. Probably tomorrow will be homebrew NPCs, what to do, and why isn't my guy not cool enough?
I struggle with this one myself. So I used to be a lot better at it. I think just with the current group I'm playing with, I don't put as much time or effort into that. I used to do all sorts of different voices and so forth for the NPCs, but now they all just sort of sound the same.
Yeah. I've never been one for voices, unfortunately.
Yeah, some people aren't.
And I'm really bad with names. So, if my players do something creative and they're going off script, I'm all for that. I love it. But when they go up to talk to the bartender, it's like, hey, bartender, what's your name? Steve. The bartender's name is Steve.
I'm so glad that you said Steve specifically. So there's actually a running gag in my own campaign where every NPC is Steve or Dave.
No, I told my wife, if we ever doing anything and you come across Steve, you're completely off book. and I'm making it up as I go along. Yep. So don't stop. Keep doing what you're doing. But just know that I have no idea what this guy's name is. He wasn't bland.
Yeah. Conveniently, Xanathar's in the back actually has a massive list of names that you can quickly pull from if need be.
Yeah.
Based on different societies, even.
Xanathar, real quick, Xanathar's is the best Dungeons Master reference material guide book that I have ever read or ever used.
For 5th edition, it's fantastic.
Almost anything.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of unknowns in 5th edition about all the different tools and crafting and everything, and it helped a lot with that. And then on top of that, it has a massive list of names in the back, which is incredibly useful in a pinch when they're asking what the barkeep's name is, or who was that peasant that I murdered the other day.
So I stabbed this guy. What was his name?
Yeah. Let me flip to page 188. Hold on a second.
Well, then they know.
Yeah. Well, it's players get used to that. Most of them don't care if they know that you're flipping to find a name, but they would like to have the name because it makes it easy for reference. Steve and Dave are fine, but sooner or later they want something a little different.
No, I'm just going to give them Steve or Dave until the cows come home.
I mean, that's what my players would be mad probably if I didn't at this point.
It's the whole Pokemon strategy where every time you go to a new town, it's the same Nurse Joy and Cop, whatever her name was.
I don't know. I never saw Pokemon. A little old for that.
Well, every town has the same Nurse Joy. They're all related. They went to the same school.
Oh, okay.
They all look the
Yeah.
same.
All Steves are related. They all have the same haircut. I don't know. Yeah, that's my cousin Steve. Yeah, hi, I'm Larry. This is my brother Daryl. This is my other brother Daryl. Very few people look at that reference. It's probably too old.
The show's called Grumpy Dungeon Masters, not Grumpy Old Dungeon Masters.
Yeah, to be fair, even I didn't watch that show. So.
Kind of side story. I was playing Adventures League, and I made a Three Stooges joke, and it went completely over one of the kids' heads. He's like, "What? Why is he doing this whoop 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 shit?"
Oh,
and I was like,
it kills me.
I was like, "How old are you again?" He's like, "I'm 12." I was like, "You have a dad, right?" And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "I need you to go home and ask your dad what the Three Stooges are. And I need you both to sit down and watch the Three Stooges for a little while."
Yeah, look, I mean, they're 5-minute shorts, 10 minutes tops. Just go to YouTube, figure it out, and it's amazing. So if you've not seen the Three Stooges, if you're 12 years old and listening to us, this is what you need to do. Go to YouTube, look it up, watch it. It's 5-10 minutes tops. Just pick any of them. They don't matter. They're all great.
I got the whole DVD box set with all the movies and everything.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I'm going to force my daughter to watch them all.
Yeah. Yeah, I occasionally run into stuff like that. So everybody in my play group, they're adults, but one of them is 22, 21, somewhere like he's really young, just barely old enough to drink. So we'll say things that he has no clue what we're talking about, that just go right over his head, because everybody else in the group is at least in their 30s.
But somehow, who runs Buttertown? Everybody knows.
Yeah, everybody seems to know who runs Bartertown. And if you don't, you need to go watch Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
So yeah, I've been wanting to actually sit down and craft out my homebrew session or my homebrew campaign and start running that. But my group is very happy running Waterdeep, and
So just keep running
yeah.
Waterdeep for now while you start crafting this other thing in the background. First thing first, make a map. And I can't stress this enough. Make a map. Even if you just sit down with a sheet of paper and a pencil and do a few simple sketches. If you want to run it in a city, make a sketch of the city. If you want to run it in an area or an entire country, just make a basic map so that you have a reference for yourself and for the players as to the locations of things. I mean, you know me, I was a professional cartographer, so maps matter a lot to me as a player, as a dungeon master. The other dungeon master so there's me and one other guy, Johnny. We swap every week pretty much. That way we don't get burned out by just being the game master. But maps weren't quite as important to him when I first started playing with him. So we played that high-level campaign up to 30th level, and I don't think we ever actually had a map. And it kind of always bugged me because I could never remember the names of the cities, and I could never remember where everything was because of that. So when that campaign wrapped up, we started another one in the same world, different location though. This was a pirate campaign, so we're out in the islands. And the first thing that we do is we run through this thing, and then by the second game session, I'm like, okay, tell me where these ports are at. Tell me this, this, and this. And I drew up a basic map, took 5 minutes, and every game we've used it. Now I know how far it is to get from one port to the next. I know which ones are north, south, east, or west. I have a starting location that I can visually just see. It helps so much. Hopefully that's useful information for you or anyone else trying to start their own campaign.
Yeah, and I think about like map generation. I'm always the way I work and the way I operate is I usually have a lot of like pre-planning and a lot of setup, and then deliver the result, draft the result a few times, go through a couple iterations of it, reorganize everything, and then have a completed product that's 100%. Now, I am a technical writer. I do user manuals and stuff like that. So that's the process that I'm familiar with. Unfortunately, in the creative landscape of creating a world that's ever growing and ever changing, ever moving, I can document it fine. But if you task me with sitting down and creating a whole thing, I would have to start in a small area like a town or a city and build up around there. But because, again, completion is to a fault, I wouldn't be happy until I had everything done. And that's not very the good homebrew way of making things.
Yeah, it's nearly impossible to do it that way.
Nearly impossible. So, I think back at like Warcraft, the Blizzard series that has been going on now for like 30 years. And you look at the original drawings of Azeroth and Draenor and what the orcs look like and what the humans look like, from that artist's perspective, and what their maps look like and what the landscape look like. And then as things have grown and more artists have been brought in to do more additions to the things and rewrites and expanding the whole universe, and you compare like the original to the current, it's like the same but insanely more detailed for obvious reasons.
Yeah. Forgotten Realms, when it first started out, if I recall right, was just somebody's homebrew campaign. And, certainly details would have been out there. Waterdeep was probably the main location, et cetera, and they sort of built off of that. I have the second edition box set for Forgotten Realms, but from that point onward, that's 30 years ago. So it has continued to grow. There have been massive amounts of books written. There have been many, many video games written. Timelines have changed. So, worlds that are created by game masters are supposed to change over time. And it's impossible to keep up with every iteration of it. Even the LARP that we play, I've been playing it literally since the very beginning, 20 some odd years ago. And things have changed. I don't remember everything that happened back then. It's easier to keep up with what's going on currently. But a lot of what has definitely been written down. So if necessary, we can go back and pull the lore and then bring it back if we really, really wanted to.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking more just from a creation aspect, like get something on paper now, do something, put it down, write it down, and it will be expanded upon later. Don't be too afraid to kind of go back and have to redraw a map in like 6 months because things changed.
Yeah, just start with a map. Start if you want to do it in a city. Start with a city map. If you want to do a city and an area, I personally like. You'll probably have to do 2 maps. Do one for a city and then one for the surrounding areas with the city. But yeah, that's a starting point for anybody trying to make their campaign. After that, you can start fleshing out locations, writing the names for them. And you have time to do all of this. There's no rush. And if things change, they change.
So a good idea, I guess, would be get players that want to document that stuff for you in game, in play, quote unquote, and then just take their material and steal it and make it your own.
I wouldn't go that far.
Copyright it and just fine.
I mean, to be fair, that's probably I'm sure that's happened over the years. I don't think Gary Gygax wrote all of what was his campaign, Greyhawk, I think. I don't think he did all that by himself.
Definitely not. Yeah,
players do build the worlds. The high level campaign where I played the sorcerer, it started off. We started out at this thing at first level, and our game master Johnny, he ran things, and we kept going and going and going. And literally, his campaign setting now is built off of those PCs. So anytime he runs one shots or even the other campaign setting. So when we finished that campaign, we all became deities. We're level 30. We managed to achieve godhood. So now I'm playing a character in the pirate campaign who is a worshiper of one of those other characters. So literally, nice. that entire campaign is sort of focused around those other characters. Its players do build those campaigns. Whenever I start running another campaign, revolving in the world of Hobtown, those characters, they ended up becoming barons. They actually own, a lot of land out there. So I've considered running another campaign where other people get hired by those PCs to go exploring into their lands that used to be Elven territory, with the ancient ruins and so forth.
I think in the current Baldur's Gate book, The Descent into Avernus, that there's actually a couple NPCs from a couple D&D podcasts that have made their way as NPCs into that game, and then Critical Role and all that success.
Oh yeah,
as well.
There was also which one was it where you went to Chult? That was the good Lord, Tomb of Annihilation. I think Dragonbait was an NPC in that. I can't recall. Dragonbait popped up as an NPC in one of the campaigns. I think it was the Tomb of Annihilation, but Dragonbait is actually from the Azure Bonds books. He's not Drizzt Do'Urden level famous, but anybody who had read those novels, when you come across an NPC that from these stories that you've read, it's just kind of a neat little feeling.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So tying all of that stuff together in long-term campaigns that you're running is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely jealous of Mike Mercer.
Yeah, Matt Mercer. Yeah,
Matt Mercer. It's too late at night for me. Definitely jealous of him and his success. Creating his world, getting all the people playing it, and just such the hype that goes into it.
Yeah,
my wife, watching that show almost religiously at this point. And
I mean, I watched. I watched probably the first 100 episodes of it, and occasionally here and there I'll still watch an episode. It's a fantastic group of players. The fact that they're all voice actors helps because they're all very talented at acting. Yeah, Matt Mercer, he was your standard dungeon master. I don't think he was ever anything special as far as game mastering. But he's had time to build and craft, and after I don't know, a couple hundred episodes of this show and just this massive following, he deserves what he's gotten. He deserves to have had his own campaign made into an official thing.
Yeah. So what frustrating things have you come across when it comes to players interacting with your homebrew setting?
Occasionally you'll have that one player who, every group has one player at least that's just always sort of a problem. I'll even say his name, Drew. Drew is not really a problem player. He's a good player, but he always wants to be intentionally a little difficult in situations. Specifically with my campaign, there's no dark elves, there's no underdark. He wants to be a dark elf. So he'll occasionally poke and prod that he's a dark elf, even when he knows that's not the case. As well, my campaign, I did allow them to play lawful evil alignment. So, of course, he plays lawful evil alignment. Now, alignments, and we've briefly had this discussion, we probably will do an entire podcast on it. You have to have the understanding of what evil alignments are, a proper understanding. To him, lawful evil was chaotic evil at first. I sort of broke him of that habit, but you can't go mass murdering people. You can't do things with no reason or thought for recourse. So initially, there was one incident where he goes into a bar and he just, the bartender witnessed him summoning a demon, which is illegal. So, of course, he murders the bartender. And I'm like, I don't really know that you would have done that, but all right. And just over time, he sort of learned alignments better. Now, mind you, Drew is not a super old school player. At this point, I think 5 or 6 years, I believe. And most of it is pretty much under me and Johnny. You definitely find it much more with newer players or younger players. You especially, I would imagine running Adventurers League, you probably have all sorts of horror stories of players who are bad players who don't know they're bad players.
Definitely I've had issues. I have more issues with DMs who
Yeah,
don't
I know
understand
you're
their
their
role.
DM issue. Yeah.
But when it comes to players, most of them know ahead of time, like, hey, okay, here are the rules, here are the settings that I can use, here are the rules to make the character, here's the frequently asked questions. This is the third or fourth iteration they've done, like Adventures League from Wizards. So they have a lot of the problems that character creation that would occur already handled.
Yeah. Now, mind you, part of it is the fact I allowed evil as an alignment. I only did it because of the fact that Hobtown itself is an evil society.
Yeah. So like in, I think one of the rules is like no evil characters,
Right.
No, you can be monster races, but you can't be evil. There's no PvP. You always start at level 1. You have to build a character from there. So you have a lot of freedom in your character choices up until level 5. You can rebuild at any time. But once you get past that, you're pretty much well set in what you're doing. And then it's just a matter of just playing the character until it gets through. And, once you're done with that setting, done with that season, retire the character and do it again.
Yeah. I personally, that's not my thing. I don't know. I like playing characters until everybody's just sort of done. And if that campaign goes to 20th or 30th level, then so be it. We played the one up to 30th level, and at the point we got to 30th, everybody really did feel like they were done, especially the game master. But we kind of got the ending that we wanted. It was time to retire those characters. The campaign I was running at 20th level, I don't know that the players really felt like they were done, but I was done as a game master. I did not want to keep running that campaign. So and it actually worked out pretty well. Like the characters all they pretty much got their retirement package, as it were. A couple of them moved to Sigil, opened up a bar. They all had noble titles, but only one of them stuck around to be the Baron.
And now they're all NPCs.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. Maybe someday I'll run like a one-shot with those guys again. But I definitely have big plans currently in the work for my campaign world. But that'll take a little time. I'm still running the Star Wars game.
So, what do you think is the most unique thing about your campaign setting?
Honestly, Hobtown. They never really got to explore Hobtown, as it were. So, like I said, you have to kind of think of Hobtown as 2 levels. You have the upper level, which is where all the elves, the humans, the gnomes, the dwarves, and so forth live. And then there's Hobtown Prime, which is only hobgoblins allowed. So they never really got to go down into that, but that is a completely different world, as it were. Getting to be a part of the Hobgoblin Society. Only one of them ever got down there, and he only ever got to go hang out with the warlocks that run the guild down there. It's pretty much warlocks that run that society. So there's all sorts of demon packs and so forth. Like that and the portal itself. The portal I thought was a kind of a unique idea. And yeah, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. To me, I hadn't heard of anyone doing something like that.
It's definitely unique. It's definitely nice to have something like that, whether it be the portal or a tavern that always has, a stagecoach going that direction you need to go.
Yeah. So the portals themselves, they got bits and pieces of the creation of them. The portals have been around pretty much since the beginning of time. They were created by one of the gods. The setting, I didn't even talk about the deities. So Forgotten Realms, I don't know how many gods they have in that setting, 200 or
705,403,000.
Yeah, it's just an absolute ridiculous amount.
And they never die. Just let some die and
There
not
there have
come
been
back.
there have been a couple. There have
Like
been
one.
no, like Mondar. Mondar never really came back. Well, I say that, but truthfully, I haven't followed Forgotten Realms. Hell, it wouldn't even surprise me if he was back. Yeah, I guess Forgotten Realms is kind of like the Marvel comic books. Nobody ever really dies.
So Orcus.
Well, Orcus wasn't a god.
He got deity status, and then
Oh.
got knocked down like 5 pegs, and then he lost his mace and was like, "Oh no, I don't have my mace. I'm gonna go be sad." And then he's like, gets his mace back. He's, "All right, I'm gonna hit people with my mace," and then it's like he's a semi deity again. I'm just like, just kill them off. And then they sunder everything, and then the gods reset, but they don't really reset. But they
reset again.
somehow.
Wait, so they had a second reset?
Yeah.
Because there was the when Io came down and it's like, all of you are just humans. Go get your godhood again, and let's watch how this plays out. And then they did it again. Apparently, like I haven't really kept up with Forgotten Realms since 3rd edition. So, but anyway, there's like 8 million deities in Forgotten Realms. There was a dozen or so, maybe a little more in Dragonlance. My own setting, I have 9 deities, 1 for every alignment. And that is another thing you will absolutely have to figure out if you run your own campaign is your pantheon. So mine, the gods are a little different. They really and truly cannot die. You have to kind of think of them as primordial. They are the world. So if you can kill off their avatars, but you can never truly kill them unless you destroy the world somehow. But for every alignment, if you are a lawful good priest, then you are a follower of Molaire, who is the lawful good deity. Very straightforward, very simple.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to steer away from deities as much as possible.
I mean, you have to have some method of getting divine magic.
I don't want divine magic.
Well, I mean, hey, it's your setting. You can absolutely do that. They did another thing. Dragonlance, I think, was the first place that did it in 3rd edition. There was the Mystic. So at one point in Dragonlance, all of the planet got stolen by one of the gods. So all of the people who had divine powers lost contact with their deities. So nobody had divine magic. So one of the characters from that pretty much found a way to channel divine magic without divinity, and they became a mystic, which was literally just, I can do cleric magic without a god. So you might want to consider something of that nature. Sort of maybe shamanistic or druidic and so forth.
I was definitely thinking of having druid and shaman creatures more for like the healy, naturey aspect of things.
Yep.
But for the strict divine, pulling out paladins and clerics, I was kind of hoping to lean away from those. I think they're not that they're overused, it's just that they're oversaturated right now. There's a lot of other interesting ways of handling divine works or healing works in a setting. Coming from 4th edition, like I did, there was a healing spec for the fighter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why'd you get rid of that? That was really cool. It was fun to play a backline fighter shooting a bow, yelling at people, and getting and healing them.
Yeah, sort of a, what do they call it? He was a motivational speaker.
Yeah, I had a dwarf that was missing an eye that fired a crossbow with a missing eye. His name was Boss.
No depth perception, just keeps missing.
He just yelled at people and got them to do all the fighting for him. I loved it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think they even have Soul Spirit. There's a monk that can heal with key magic, I believe, in 5th edition.
I think it's a Unearthed Arcana right now, but yeah,
okay.
There's one that is doing that.
Yeah, like if you want healing magics, you definitely can do it without clerics. Like druids, or maybe even throw like healing word onto their spell list, and they could more or less cover the cleric's position.
Yeah, for me, I wanted the magic to come from very particular sources, and kind of like I like the component bag in 5th edition. And I think there's a lot of players out there who use a component bag the way it's meant to be used. Pulling out like a little bit of lipstick to do like a charming spell or things along those lines. But no one ever does. Everyone just takes an arcane focus and just goes, okay, I'm just going to cast through this.
Yeah.
And then they never talk about what they're using to cast their spells from ever again.
I don't even do that much. Like, I play arcane casters, and I'm like, I don't waste my time with a focus. I don't worry about components. It's just I cast blank.
Yeah.
And if the DM wants us to go more into detail, then we will. I don't particularly care whether my players go into a lot of detail. When it comes to components, the only thing I ever require of them is if there is a gold piece value, you must have it. Otherwise,
that's the rule. A component pouch doesn't have anything of gold value, so you can just pull out lipstick and just keep casting charm spells until the cows come home.
Yeah.
With just the component pouch. And I kind of like it, but like I said, in the world I'm working on, there's a very particular source that magic comes from, so it's all about how you utilize that particular resource over and over again. And then, still factor in all your spell slots and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's that's the beauty of homebrew campaigns. You can literally make them as in-depth as you want. You can do anything. I'm running the one-shot this coming weekend, and I'm not allowing any arcane magic at all. Doesn't exist, because they are a barbarian tribe who has no arcane casters. There are no sorcerers in that group. Warlocks are not a thing.
Then you say one of your players is going to try to take that barbarian feat to get the...
I figured they would take the... there's a feat that you could take to get an arcane spell, like a cantrip. And oddly enough, they didn't try to do that. They said they'll just play a fighter. So, all right.
Well, there's the Elder's Knight.
Yeah, no, I told them. That was one of them that I specifically listed. So.
You can't be a battle master because they're too OP, and you can't be a great weapon fighter because I'm not going to deal with pole arms.
Well, hey, do you want to do an entire podcast on how broke as hell the fighter is in 5th edition? Because we can do that.
Maybe in the future.
Yeah, we should do one entire thing on just broken builds that you have seen over the years. Still, nothing ever will top the Frenzied Berserker from 3rd edition.
Battle Rager from 4th edition.
Did Battle Rager do 800 damage in one round?
It did not do 800 damage in a round. We
literally killed a Tarrasque in one round.
In 4th edition, there were a lot of broken builds, and there were a lot of builds that did over 1,000 damage per turn. And one of them was like a charging barbarian fighter build, where like you could move 5 feet, make an attack, a charge attack, and because the charge attack hit, you could move 5 feet and then make another attack. You just literally spin.
Yeah, but
Diablo style.
You have to have things within reach to do that, the 5-foot step and so forth.
Right, but since you're using a pole arm, most everything is in reach of you.
Yeah, but I'm just sooner or later you run out of enemies.
The one I'm referring to, the Battle Rager, though, it wasn't the most. It had very good DPS when you got the right items and used the right things. And it had good DPS because the damage that it did became its temporary life total. So it could do 600, 700, 800 damage in a round, and that's its health pool until it's the beginning of his next turn.
Yeah, that could be kind of hell, even if it's only doing 300 damage.
When I saw the post on it and saw the build breakdown, and then the guy went through and did like this little program that he had wrote to fight Orcus. It beat Orcus by itself because Orcus could not do the damage to take him out, because I don't think there was anything that was instant killing in 4th edition either.
Yeah.
like Finger of Death and all those spells, they just did a straight flat damage total to like normal people's hit point pools.
Kind of like 5th edition. Like 5th just does damage. I think there's one spell that might insta-kill, but it's not. There's not many. It's very, very limited. Like even Power Word Kill is practically useless because they have to have lower hit points for it to work.
I'm going to check that real quick. So I'm actually gotta be doing that here soon to my players.
Yeah, but Frenzy Berserker from 3rd edition, I think, is the most broken damn thing I've ever seen. The only weakness of it was the fact that when you start frenzying, you attack the nearest target. So there were definitely instances where we had to resurrect party members because our Berserker killed them.
That's awesome.
Yeah, conveniently, I was the Shadow Sorcerer, and he had crap for will saves. So if he ever turned on us, I would just send him into the Shadow Realm until he calmed down. So,
yeah, Power Word Kill. He does have that, and he has Finger of Death.
There you go. Good luck to your players. On that note, I think we've spent enough time talking about this tonight.
Next time we do this, we're going to be grumpy.
Well, that's pretty easy. We can just talk. What we do is next one we need to talk about player tropes. Like the different types of players, the Munchkin, the Power Gamer, and so forth, because that'll definitely get us grumping. At least it will me.
All right. Next session, the players we play with.
Yep. Bye, Craig.
Bye, Craig. I love you.